Welcome back. So today's video is about why restriction is necessary in order to reach your fitness goals and especially your weight loss goals. So a lot of people want to try absolutely everything they can to get around the simple fact that in order to lose weight, you will have to restrict something within your life. Now, a lot of people don't like the idea of restriction. Restriction has been equated to an eating disorder. Restriction has been equated to some sort of evil concept whereby, if you're telling people to stop consuming so much, you're ruining their fun, you're ruining their life, and you're ruining their entire being as a human, essentially, from simply stating the reality. And so when we consider restriction, the problem is that most people look at these things far too black and white. They look at things from the perspective of, well, I'm eating kind of whatever I like now, and I like to eat a whole lot of things, and I should be able to continue eating a whole lot of things. And there must be some way, because I've seen some people can eat kind of what they want, so why can't I? But the reality of it is, if you're struggling to lose weight, if you're at a weight now that you really want to lose some body fat effectively, and the more you have to lose, the more important this is, because as it gets, closer and closer to your kind of goal weight, it becomes trickier. But if you've got a significant amount of weight to lose, then fundamentally you have to reduce the amount of energy that is going into your body. And so when people talk about calories in, calories out, people get very upset about this concept these days, and they want to get into these really minute concepts and these ideas of how, various hormones will interplay with your body, and the fact that calories in, calories out is slightly different for different people. And all of these things are, they have a level of truth to them, but the fundamental reality is that there is too much energy going into the body. And too much is going to differ for different people. So, the young guy who's still at school or whatever, the amount of food he can eat is often quite substantial, whereas the person who is in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they've got a different body, they've got a different situation. This doesn't mean that calories in, calories out, and the entire concept of energy balance is gone. It simply means that the amount of energy that you can take in to sustain your body is a lot lower than most people want to believe. The human body is quite efficient. I would say it's very efficient. If you look at how much activity you can do, and then look at especially something like junk food and the volume of food that you actually need in order to sustain the human organism is quite small. And so when we have such an abundance of food available, when we have so many choices available to us at the drop of a hat, we have food apps, we have takeaway shops, we have endless amounts of junk food in the supermarket, and all of these things are sources of energy for our body. And if you consume too many of them, inevitably, almost every single person, given the opportunity to eat too much food, will gain weight. And the people who don't, it's a very small number. In my experience, having trained, well over 1,000 different people, the number of people who, for this, that it doesn't apply to, and it still applies, but it doesn't apply in the way that people think. But it's probably about 5% of the population who can kind of eat what they want, in the sense that they don't really feel any need to monitor what they have, and they'll still maintain a pretty good diet, a pretty good body weight as a result. And this comes down to, usually in these people, it's that they don't have a great deal of appetite. And so whatever's going on with their hormonal balance, and this has often been something that they've had since they were younger, they simply don't have the appetite that most of us have. And this means that they just simply do not feel hungry enough, regularly enough, to want to have the desire to consume anywhere near enough food to gain weight. And so when you look at their, I get people to do a diet plan, a diet history for me, and show me what they're eating each week. And you'll see what these people eat. And even though they'll say, well, I'm just eating so much, And when you look at what they're actually eating, it's actually quite a small amount of total volume of food, because they just say that they're not usually hungry. They can maybe skip breakfast, lunch, and then just have dinner, and they don't feel that put out by it. So in their mind, they're not kind of really restricting a great deal. For the other 95% of us, though, your hunger is going to lead you to easily be able to eat far in excess of what your body needs. And this is kind of a good thing if you look at like an evolutionary perspective of, humans, before we had such an abundance of food. It was obviously a very good thing to have. The hunger is what drives you to go out and hunt some food, or to scavenge for some plants out in the wild, or whatever it may be. That hunger is that motivation to go out to find something to eat to sustain your body. Every animal has it. Every animal has a hunger drive. But with the modern ecosystem that we live in an environment that is so different to what that situation was then, where there was a shortage and where there was scarcity of food available to us. Now, in most modern countries, and even in a lot of developing countries, they actually are already running into this problem, is that for most of us, there is just a sheer abundance of food available, and especially high energy food. So, very densely, caloric dense foods available. And this means if we obey our hunger drive and we just eat everything that we see, everything that we want, inevitably in almost every person, that is going to lead to weight gain, and it's going to lead to health problems. And it's an uncomfortable truth. And what I've found is a lot of people they kind of hope that this wouldn't be the case. So what you'll see is there's all sorts of diets, and they all want to proclaim that if you just, you're not really restricting yourself if you can eat as much as you want. But often they still are restricting. They might not be restricting in volume, but they're restricting in type of food. So they'll say, well, you can eat as much as you want, but it must be meat. Or you can eat as much as you want of these foods. Or you can eat as much as you want as long as it doesn't go under this many calories. So there's all these situations where they're trying to sort of say you can eat anything you want, but they're still restricting your food. They're still restricting the amount of food that you have. And the way they're doing it is maybe not as obvious as when you just have a calorie-controlled diet. And there's so many different ways to restrict food. And part of what successful long-term good health and weight loss in the current context that we live in is understanding what restrictions you can live with. Because we all have different preferences, we all have different lifestyles, we have different histories. Depending on what country you're from, you might have certain foods that you like versus foods that exist in other countries and so on. You might have certain ways that you eat in terms of, whether you like breakfast, lunch, and dinner more, or whether you like to snack more. You might be someone who likes to drink alcohol, you might be someone who doesn't. So there's so many different ways that you can approach restricting your food. And none of them are really going to be right or wrong overall, because it's going to depend on you and your situation. And so a lot of what building better health is understanding and trying, basically, trial and error. What things can you restrict? A lot of people who want to start getting fitter, one of the easiest ways to to restrict a whole lot of energy coming into their body is to quit drinking alcohol. Because, alcohol is very caloric dense in a lot of ways. A lot of the drinks that people have a lot of calories, and it also tends to lead you to eat even more calories. But for some people, alcohol is too big of a part of their life. They like it too much. I'm someone who still, I like to drink alcohol, so I would prefer to restrict other things and still be able to drink some beers from time to time versus restricting the beers and then, making that energy up somewhere else. So at the end of the day, you are always going to have to restrict something. You cannot get around the fact that if you are struggling with your weight, you're going to have to restrict your diet in some way. And the best way that you can do this is a way that you don't feel restricted. So even though you are restricting yourself, you're trying to aim to do it in a way where you feel comfortable and you feel like you aren't as restricted as you could be. And so generally, the best way to do this is by eating better quality food. And this means that if you're eating more whole foods, you're eating fruit, vegetables, more nutrition dense, lower energy foods, you're going to be more satiated. So if you eat a ton of vegetables at breakfast, a 500 calorie meal from whole foods versus a 500 calorie meal from junk food, the 500 calorie meal from whole food is going to be much more satisfying. It's going to fill your stomach up. It's going to last a lot longer, that feeling of fullness, as opposed to the 500 calories of junk food. And so for most people, the restriction comes down to working out which foods can you try and remove from your diet as much as possible. Other people might restrict their diet with time control. So they'll do intermittent fasting. So they might just eat 2 meals a day versus having, say, lunch and dinner, or maybe even just dinner, and eliminating food based on a time restriction. Other people will restrict based simply on calories. So they'll eat anything they want and they just count the number of calories they have each day. All of these different approaches can work. All of these different approaches will have the same fundamental end result, which is reducing the amount of energy that is coming into your body. If you don't reduce the amount of energy that goes into your body, you will not achieve the goals that you want. And now a lot of people will say, it's not this black and white. It's not, I can reduce my calories and I'm not going to lose as much weight as the next person. And you're right, it's not black and white. But the fundamental idea is the same. And I have not seen a single person who has stuck to reducing their energy not lose a significant amount of weight over time. Every person who has been honest about sticking to a more restricted approach, who has made the effort to implement some strategies to reduce the amount of food they're eating, every single client I've ever had has lost weight as a result. Now, this has always been in different amounts. Some people lose weight easier than others. Some people have an easier time at this than others do. There's a lot more to it, of course. But fundamentally, if you reduce your energy intake, you will start to see results. The problem that most people have is that they either go too restrictive too quickly, so they drop their energy far too much, far too quickly, and they feel like absolute shit, they're hungry all the time, then they end up binging and actually eating even more than if they'd just been sensible in the first place. That's the main problem people have with restricting food. Or they start to restrict things too much for too long and they simply go back into their old eating habits. Now, if you want to lose weight, you want to get better, you want to get fitter, you have to understand this concept and stop trying to pretend it doesn't exist. We all wish that we could eat whatever we want. We all wish that we could eat huge amounts of food, but it is simply not the case. Working out how you will restrict your food intake is often not an easy process. It might take a bit of trial and error. It might take many months, and for some people many years, to find the balance where they can control their food intake and implement strategies that work for them and their family. So if you're interested in finding out some more ideas for yourself, or you have any questions, you have any comments you'd like to make, feel free to send me a message. I'll have a lot more about this topic in future videos, but I hope it's been informative for you.